everybody, I am Chef Ben, and this is a late presentation of Dinner with Ben. This is episode 9, and today we are doing mushroom risotto. And this is brought to you by Ashworks Cutting Boards and T-North Carbonated Iced Tea. Now it is 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. It is not Monday evening. Last night Facebook went down, as did Instagram and WhatsApp and a whole bunch of stuff. And so I was not able to do my live video. I did do a video and recorded it, but then when I tried to upload it to my computer, I lost the biggest chunk of the video because I had it broken up in pieces. So instead of just recording a video, trying to edit it and upload it, I thought that I would just go ahead and do a live presentation. You're probably not going to watch this live. You're probably at work right now, but hopefully you'll watch this evening and make the risotto along with me. So what we're going to make today is, as I said, a mushroom risotto. So risotto is rice generally that is cooked slowly in liquid to draw out the natural starches and make it creamy. It shouldn't have cream in it. If there's cream in the risotto, it just means that somebody's cheating, adding cream to it to kind of speed up the process. So the creaminess actually comes from drawing the natural starch out of the rice. What we're going to use is called arborio rice. So this is a short grain rice, which is what you use for risotto. It's similar to like Japanese sticky rice. The sticky rice is sticky because of the amount of starch. So this is arborio rice. It is a short grain rice and probably the most common, at least in this part of the world, for making risotto. It's grown predominantly in southern Italy and also in California now. Now, arborio is by far, to me, the most common rice for risotto, but there's other rices you can use as well, such as baldo, carnaroli, martelli, and I can't read my own writing. Violone nano. Yeah, I had to write that down. I'm sorry. But in North America, arborio is by far the easiest to come by, and it works very well. It also works very well for rice pudding. So, without any further ado, let's kind of get going. So I have a 1/4 cup of rice measured out. That's enough for one person. For every additional person, add another 1/4 cup. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is I actually have a stock on. I made one. If you're using store-bought stock, put it in a pot, bring it to a boil, and reduce the heat. We need it hot, so that when you add it to the rice, it's not dropping the temperature of the pan. So my stock is already hot. The next thing I'm going to do is actually just saute my mushrooms a little bit. Now, I said to use whatever kind of mushrooms you want. Yesterday I had some really cool mushrooms. Today I have some fairly normal mushrooms. I have chanterelles, which are one of the top 3 mushrooms in the world, according to a lot of people. That includes truffles, morels, and chanterelles. They have a really mild flavor, and the flavors that come out of them are soluble in fat, so they're a lot better when they're cooked in butter or something like that. And we have cremini mushrooms, which are like baby portobellos, and then we just have white button mushrooms. So these are all going to cook at about the same speed. If you had like a portobello or something, it's going to take probably a little bit longer because it's thicker. So I'm just going to grab a knife off this beautiful knife holder that Ashworks made me and gave to me. Thanks, guys. So the chanterelle mushrooms, I'm just going to pull apart. So these are a fluted mushroom, like an oyster mushroom or any number of mushrooms. And any fluted mushroom you can just kind of pull apart like that. We don't need these in super small pieces. And when we cook these, we're actually just going to really lightly saute them in butter and a little bit of olive oil. We don't want to cook them too much because we're going to add them to the rice a little later on. So I'm just going to set those aside. I'm going to take my creminis, and I'm only making enough risotto for me, so I'm only going to use 2 creminis. Just kind of cut them in half and just slice them nice and thin, about 1/4 inch in thickness. While I'm doing this, I'm just going to turn my pan on to a medium temperature. My gauge goes to 9. I'm going to turn the pan on to 6. Okay? and then I'm going to use 3 just white button mushrooms. Yesterday I had chanterelles, I had oyster mushrooms, and I had lobster mushrooms. No, sorry, I had lion's mane mushrooms, not oyster mushrooms. And so the risotto tasted incredibly good, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm not really looking forward to eating mushroom risotto again today. As delicious as it is, you can only eat it so many times. So we're just going to let our pan heat up there. In the meantime, let's look at what else I have. So I have about a cup of white wine, just a dry white wine. You don't want anything sweet because you don't want to add sweetness to the risotto. I have an onion. We're only going to use about half of that. And then I have 2 cloves of garlic. And actually, the onion, I'm probably only going to use a quarter of it because I'm only making enough risotto for me. And then we have some rosemary and some Parmesan, which we'll add later. So I'm just going to add about a tablespoon of butter to my pan. Then I'm going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil. If we only use butter, it's going to burn. The pan's going to be hot enough that there'll be enough heat to burn the butter. The olive oil will actually prevent that and just make for a more consistent cook. And once the butter melts and starts to get foamy, then we can add our mushrooms into it. What else do we have? What's going on? So let's talk about risotto. I'm going to have a lot of time to fill in a few minutes when we're actually cooking the risotto, but we'll talk about where it comes from. So risotto is an Italian dish. My butter's hot. I'm going to have my mushrooms in there. And these are not going to take long. We want the pan hot because if we put the mushrooms in a cold pan, rather than just like kind of frying nice, they're going to release their liquids and it's going to get kind of soggy and gross, which is not what we're looking for. So let's give them a little toss. Add a touch of salt and pepper in here. And we can even add just a sprig of rosemary. So rice was introduced to Italy, I think, in the 13th century, and by the 14th century they were growing it in southern Italy. And the regions of Italy that grow rice are well suited to short grain varieties, and so that's why Italians grow short grain varieties of rice. Now, risotto is more of a technique than a dish. It doesn't really have to do with rice. It's more the technique of slowly cooking something to draw the natural starches out and get a creamy texture. So you can do it with barley, you can do it with different grains, you can do it with millet, you can do it with all kinds of things. It's just rice is probably the most common. But the Italians would have made, long before rice was introduced, they made things like gruel, which is essentially like a porridge, and that would have been the precursor to risotto. And when corn was introduced, they made the same thing. That's where we get polenta from. So polenta is essentially like a corn risotto, if you want to think of it like that. And it's all just gruel. Just rice gruel and corn gruel. It tastes really good. So I'm going to take these mushrooms out because I don't want to cook them too much. I'm going to turn this off and just set my pan aside. Now I'm going to take my onion. I'm not even going to cut right through the center because I just don't need that much onion. Now, if you're making this for 2 people, then use half an onion, but I'm only going to use about a quarter. If I can. And I think I'm only going to use 1 of the cloves of garlic too. We don't really need that much. So the trick here is you want to cut the onion and the garlic as fine as you can. You don't want it to be any bigger than the grains of rice, because you don't really want it to show up in the dish. You want it to just kind of disappear in with everything else. So all I did there was make a horizontal cut through my onion. I didn't cut all the way through, which allowed it to hold together. And then I made a few vertical cuts and then rotated it and cut it again, which if you've been watching the show or this lesson for a while, you're probably familiar with that technique. And if not, I should have explained it better, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to take 1 clove of garlic. I'm not going to puree the garlic. I'm just going to chop it about the same size as the onion and the rice is the word I'm looking for. Okay. So I'm just going to make a slice in half and then cut it into smaller pieces and then chop it. So if we puree the garlic, because we want to saute it a little bit, if we puree it, it's just going to burn. So that's why we want it about the same size as the onion, because we really don't want burnt garlic, as it's gross. Okay, so the only other thing I'm going to do is take a sprig of rosemary, a small one, don't need a ton, and I'm going to chop that up nice and fine. I don't know if you can see my Hashworks collection is growing. They were nice enough to supply me with some more boards. So you'll probably be seeing some posts with pictures of new boards in it over the next little while. Yes. Okay, so rosemary's chopped up. And I'm actually going to set this aside. This whole board, I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to bring this burner over. Now, I'm not technically supposed to leave this or use this indoors, but I do have really good ventilation in here, and it is on. And I'm going to be standing here for like 20 minutes. I don't want to have my back to you the whole time, so that's why I'm using this. I don't recommend that you use one of these indoors at home, but I'm a professional. I'm a trained professional. It's okay. So mushrooms over here. I'm just going to bring the hot stock over. It smells delicious. And so all I have in here is 1 carrot, 1 onion, 1 celery stalk, the stems from the cremini mushrooms and the button mushrooms, and then like a small handful of button mushrooms, 1 sprig of rosemary, 1 bay leaf, and water. That's it. Okay. So I'm going to use the same pan that I used for the mushrooms. Not even going to bother cleaning it out. We're going to add about a teaspoon butter, and we don't need this on high, medium heat's fine. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of olive oil. I'm just going to wait for a pan to heat up for a sec. It's starting to already. Now the trick is really just to have everything ready to go. You don't want to start cooking and then realize you forgot something. So that's why we do all of our prep first. Now if this is hot, I'm going to add the onions first. Okay? The onions are going to take longer to cook than the garlic, even though they're about the same size. So we're going to add the onions first. And maybe a spoon. So I have this just below medium. We don't want this too hot. We really don't want burnt garlic and onions in our risotto. It does not taste good. And it doesn't look very nice either. And we're just lightly cooking the onions just enough till they start to turn translucent, and then we'll add the garlic in. And then we're going to toast our rice a little bit. We're not looking to brown our onions at all. We just want them to start to turn clear, which they're starting to do. So I'm going to add the garlic in now. And we stir. So this dish, it takes effort. I'm not going to lie to you, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, as an anniversary dinner or in some kind of celebration, this is absolutely delicious, and it's no more effort to make a huge batch than it is to make a small batch. So if you have a lot of people coming over for dinner, you really want to impress them. Yeah, it's work, but it's no more work to make it for 8 people than it is to make it for 1. So I'm going to add rice in here. The garlic didn't take long, it's just smelling aromatic, that's what I'm looking for. I'm just going to lightly toast my rice. We just want it to the rice to kind of turn translucent as well. It'll kind of go like a pearl color, which is what we're looking for. And that's only going to take about a minute, minute and a half. And then we'll start with some wine. Perfect. So the rice is just starting to change, but my garlic and my onion are starting to brown. So I'm actually going to add the wine now, just to kind of stop that. And I'm only going to add about half of the wine to start. And now, because we're using the same pan that I used to cook the mushrooms, essentially I'm deglazing the pan and lifting all the little bits of mushroom that are stuck to the pan. So my risotto turned kind of a brown color, but that's just flavor from the mushrooms. If we were doing just a plain risotto, you wouldn't get that color. That's just because we put the mushrooms in the pan. So now we're just going to stir this, and we're just going to reduce the liquid. We're going to pretty much cook it until the liquid is all gone, and then we're going to add some wine in here, some more wine the rest of it. And again, this is just a dry white wine. So that's almost all evaporated, and I'm just going to add the rest of the wine. And again, it was about a cup in total. And I'm just going to turn my pan up a little bit. And so the technique is really this. We're just going to add little bits of liquid, cook it until it is absorbed by the rice and evaporates, and then we'll add more. And we'll do that until the rice is cooked. And we don't want the rice to be mushy. We want to be able to feel the individual grains as we're eating it. So it's really about tasting it and checking the texture of the rice. That's how you know it's done. There's not really any other way. And by stirring it, we're helping to draw out the starch, which is going to make it more creamy. So if you're making a huge batch of this, you don't have to stand over it and stir it constantly, but you want to stir it at least once a minute, once every 2 minutes maximum. Minimum, rather. So again, we're just going to cook it and stir it until the wine is absorbed and evaporates. And if you don't have wine at home, you don't have to add it. It's pretty standard, and it adds a really nice flavor to the rice. But it's not the end of the world. So we stir, we stir, we stir. So the first recipe for risotto appears in 1809, and it's for risotto alla Milanese, which is risotto that is flavored and colored with saffron. And for a long time, that's all risotto was risotto alla Milanese. And then over time, it morphed into other things, other additions. Now, so the story goes that the recipe shows up in 1809. It's the first record of it. And I mean, rice was only grown in the 14th century, but there is a story dating back to the 15th century about how the dish risotto alla Milanese was developed. So the story goes that there was a glassmaker. He made stained glass for windows and stuff. And he really loved saffron. He loved to dye glass with saffron. He pretty much used it in everything. It was his signature. And his daughter was getting married. And the glassmaker had an apprentice who thought it would be funny if he added saffron to the rice as it was cooking and kind of stirred it in a whole bunch to draw the color out and really make sure that the rice held the color. But what he was doing was drawing the starch out of the rice, and he made the first risotto. And he served it as a joke, or he got the cooks to serve it as a joke, thinking that everybody would just think it was funny, but really everybody loved it, and risotto was born. That's the story of this. So almost all my wine is gone, so now I'm going to add a ladle full of stock. In all told, we're going to use about probably about 2.5 to 3 cups of stock. If you're doing this for 2 people, you'll probably use 3 to 4 cups of stock. And again, add the stock, and then we cook. That's it. So yes, risotto was made kind of as a joke, but it turned out everybody loved it. Well, at least that's the legend behind it. As you've got 15 more minutes of risotto cooking, and I'm gone. I've gone through all of my stories and all of my risotto facts. So just going to stand here and stare at the camera for the next 15 minutes as I stir my risotto. That's not true. I'm not going to do that. What else? So yeah, we're just going to do this for a little while. And risotto is great because you can add so many different things to it, as I'm sure you're aware. You can make a pea risotto, which is really good on its own or with chicken or seafood. Beet risotto is delicious, especially with like salmon. Asparagus risotto. I feel like I'm about to Forrest Gump you guys here with the bubblegum shrimp because I don't know what else to say. You've got seafood risotto, you've got squid ink risotto, you've got lobster risotto, you got all kinds of risottos. So learning this technique, although it does take a little bit of time to do, it's not difficult. And learning it, you can create any kind of really delicious dish that you want. When you're doing this, it might seem logical to turn the heat up so that the liquid evaporates quicker, but that's not really what you're looking for because you're trying to get the liquid into the rice, not evaporate it. Right? So by turning the heat up, you're just cooking the rice out longer, or you're cooking the liquid out quicker, so then you're going to stand here and add more liquid for a longer period of time. If you can hear that, that's my cat scratching in her litter box. That noise in the background, I don't know if you can hear it or not. So, and I mean, I don't know, if you're doing this along with me, you can probably tell that your risotto is already getting kind of a creamy consistency, which is perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. And it's just a matter of doing this until the rice is cooked. And the reason we don't just add a bunch of liquid and then cook it is A, because we don't know exactly how much liquid we're going to need to add, and B, we're not going to be able to draw the starch out the same way. So that's why we're just adding the liquid in small increments as opposed to all at once. And you know when to add more liquid? When the liquid is pretty much all gone. That's the trick. And so as I said, risotto is kind of like a technique more than a dish. And one of my favorite risottos is actually a risotto made with potatoes. So you take a russet potato or like a starchy potato like that, you cut it into a very fine dice, and then you cook it the exact same way we're cooking this. You serve that with pork or chicken or anything like that. And though it's a huge pain in the ass, cutting potatoes like that and everything, it's very, very delicious. And like I said, you can do this with barley, you can do this with millet, you can do it with farro, you can do it with all kinds of things. And you can even mix your grains if you want kind of a unique flavor. And have a drink of water. And we stir. I don't know, I just gotta, I don't know if you guys know the song, When I Dip, You Dip, We Dip. I don't know why, but in my head I just was thinking, when I stir, you stir, we stir. I don't know why. But that's what's happening. We're stirring, we're stirring, we're stirring. And we're gonna add some more liquid. Now after this bit is absorbed by the rice, we're going to give it a taste and see how we're doing texturally, because it looks like it's getting fairly close. And the last thing we want is to overcook our rice. And again, you want like the texture. You want to be able to taste, and feel the individual grains of rice. That's really important. Because anybody can make mush. Right? I think that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make something delicious. We're trying to make the rice still with a little bit of bite, but get that creamy texture. That's the important thing to remember when you're making risotto, is you're not making mush. You're making something fancy. There's not really anybody watching this live. I didn't expect there to be, but if there were, this would be a fantastic time for questions. Then I could answer them. So when we finish the risotto, we'll add the mushrooms in just before we're done. We'll add in some Parmesan cheese. We'll season it with salt and pepper, and about 2 minutes before that, we're going to add the rosemary. So after we taste this, we'll probably add the rosemary to it. And we're not really adding salt and pepper to it right now, because the Parmesan cheese is going to add a fair amount of salt to the dish. So we're going to wait and see how it tastes before we add salt. And I'm just throwing stock everywhere, I don't know why. Beauty, beauty, beauty. And so the reason, I think I already said this, but the reason why we heat our stock up is because we don't want to add cold liquid to the pan. The wine was fine, there's not that much being added. But the stock, because we're adding so much of it, if we add cold stock to the pan, every time we add it, it's going to cool the pan down. We're going to have to wait for the pan to heat back up. It's going to take forever to make the risotto. So that's why we're using hot stock as opposed to a cold or room temperature stock. Even room temperature would be better than cold. Alright, so that liquid is almost dissolved. Let's take a little taste. When you taste, make sure you're actually getting rice and not just the onion or the garlic. Yeah, so it's still a bit of bite to it. Still going to need probably one more addition, but I am going to add the rosemary in now. Okay. So rosemary is considered like a hard herb. It's very hardy, and it can sustain a lot of heat. And you actually need to cook it a bit to draw out the flavor, as opposed to something like parsley or cilantro or sage that are soft herbs. If we were using sage or parsley and we added it now, by the time the dish was done, they wouldn't really taste like much. But by adding the rosemary now, it's actually going to draw the oils out, and it's going to flavor the risotto really nicely. But had we added fresh rosemary in the beginning, by now the flavor would all be kind of cooked out and mellow. This is looking delicious. I ate this last night. I'm going to eat it for lunch today. It does taste really good though. And if you end up making this at home, which I really hope you do, please take pictures and send them or share them on my wall or on Instagram or wherever. I'd love to see them. I always love to see what you guys make. Yeah, because that's kind of the whole reason I do this, is so that you guys will cook, not just me. I already know how to make this, you know. Ooh, it's beautiful. So let's check the rice. Gonna need another addition, I think. So the risotto, it's going to have that wine flavor in here because we reduced a bunch of wine into it. And then it's going to have the stock flavor and then the mushrooms and the rosemary. But it does taste just ever so slightly sour from the wine, and that's perfectly normal. And once we add the Parmesan in there, that's kind of going to balance it out. So honestly, at this point, don't worry too much about flavor. What you're checking for is texture more than anything. The flavor will come once we add the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so that's probably going to be the last addition of liquid. I might add a touch more, but because that's about it, I'm going to add the mushrooms in now. So they warm up and they can kind of help to flavor the risotto. And any liquid that builds up on the plate, add that in as well. We don't want to waste anything. I'm just going to stir that in. I'm going to add a bit of pepper. Oh, it's coming together. And you could add other things to this. You could add a handful of spinach just before it's done. You could add some cooked kale, some Swiss chard. Well, last night when we had it, my wife added some dried cranberries to it, which looked delicious, and she said it was really good. And I mean, to the mushroom risotto specifically, there's a lot of things you can add. So that's kind of the good thing about risotto, is it's really just a blank canvas that you can do anything with. And this is the basic preparation of it. It's onion, garlic, brown that or cook that out a little bit, toast your rice a little bit, add some wine, cook it down, add a bit more wine, cook that down, and then just add stock. And it can be any kind of flavor stock you want, and then you add your flavorings. So it's really a very basic technique that comes out of ancient Roman and ancient Egyptian gruel. Really, I hate to say it, but it's a fairly simple thing to do. It just takes a while. Okay, so I'm going to grate some Parmesan cheese in here, and that's going to help thicken it up. I'm going to turn the heat way down as well. You want a decent amount of Parmesan in here, probably about 2 tablespoons. And don't use the Kraft packaged stuff. That stuff is like sawdust stuff. Just this stuff, like buying a piece of Parmesan is about the same price once you actually like grate it down and break it and like do the math on it, and it's so much better. And I know that stuff has a place. I grew up eating that on Kraft or on spaghetti and stuff. I know it has its place, but it's not in this. Get some real Parmesan. And Parmesan, it's going to last in your fridge for a very long time. You might notice some white bits come out. That is just salt. It's not mold. It's just salt coming out of the cheese. So I turn the heat off. We're going to give it a little taste. Beauty. And a little bit of salt in here. Okay. And get this out of the way. And so here we go. Your risotto should not be a liquid. It should be creamy, but it shouldn't slosh around, right? So I can pick this plate up. It's going to slide around, but it's not sloshing. The rice has texture. There you can see and feel the individual grains. And when you bite in, there's a slight give on it. And I actually forgot, I'm just going to put about half a teaspoon of butter in here. Should have done that in the pan, but I forgot. So I'm going to mix that in. And it's just going to add a slight richness and really just makes it so delicious. So a little bit of butter, spread that out. And then why not just a little bit more Parmesan cheese. So there you go, guys. Mushroom risotto. Really, I mean, it's about the base. It's about just being able to make that risotto so that you can add whatever you want to it. Thank you so much for watching it again. I'm so sorry that I couldn't do this on Monday night. Like I said, Facebook was down. There's nothing I can do about it. Yeah, so if you do make this, or when you do make this, please share it with me. I'd love to see it. Thank you for watching, sincerely, and thank you to my sponsors, Ashworks Cutting Boards, especially for all the beautiful cutting boards and the knife block. And thank you to T North Carbonated Iced Tea, now in cans. Check them out. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I think next week, I said we're going to do tacos, which I'm really excited for. Yeah, I'm going to go eat my second plate of mushroom risotto in 2 days. I hope that you have a fantastic evening. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.